Hi, and welcome to It's Not Obvious Learn from Others Edition. And today we're talking about working in retail, and today it's me and Gentatsu. As a reminder, the Learn from Others series is really for fun, and it's typically topics that I have little knowledge of. And in this case, I really haven't done much, or technically, I don't think I've ever worked in retail ever, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the topics that we're talking about today is we're talking about how do you get a retail job? What's the number one thing to keep in mind? And what's it like working in retail? The good, the bad. I heard that there are benefits, some perks to it, depending on what you do, where you work. And are there any wild stories from working in retail? This episode is probably for people who have never worked in retail, such as myself, and maybe I'm contemplating it. And people who have worked in retail, I've heard horror stories about people who've worked in retail, or horror stories from people who have worked in retail about what their customers have done and stuff. And of course, Reddit is has a lot of stories like that of customers who are like the Karens and stuff of the world. Anyway, would be interesting if Gentatsu here with us have something to share about that. As always, um, oh, the disclaimer is this is intended to be anecdotal, and uh, we're not experts by any means, or at least I'm not, and I'm assuming that Gentatsu is not an expert at working in retail either. So keep that in mind, and we'll chat. All right, so Gentatsu, thanks for joining me again, and thanks for recommending me StreamYard. This would be my first time recording with StreamYard. Still working out the details, still working out the kinks, but I guess we'll see how it goes. Okay, so hey, how you doing?
I am doing very well. Thank you for having me again.
Well, this is your idea, so thank you so much. You're recommending that I create these episodes, and you're recommending StreamYard, so I only have you to thank too. Anyway, so when was the last time you worked in retail?
Ooh, the last time I was actually in retail was probably now about five years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. So it's now been a while. But prior to that, I was probably in retail for almost 20 years.
Wow, I didn't realize that you were in retail for that long. Do you mind sharing like the kind of places you work retail at, and why?
Well, the first retail store that I actually worked at was CompUSA because
Oh,
of
dude,
computers.
that is so long ago.
Yeah,
Wow, I think you just dated yourself, man.
it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. And then after that, I actually became a vendor rep for a very well-known company, electronics computer company, and I
okay,
actually went around to all different types of stores to do trainings and whatnot. So that's basically been my retail experience, and I've been doing. I did that for probably
oh,
about 15 years or so.
interesting. So when you say retail, you don't really mean like working on in the retail store itself directly. You also mean working for retail stores in other capacities than being like a sales rep or somebody on the floor.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, as a vendor rep, I pretty much saw exactly what was going on in retail stores anyway. So that was, I have a pretty good idea. I may not necessarily be interacting personally with some of these people, but otherwise, I've had pretty good experience overall with retail and yeah. So
Fascinating. Okay, so that wasn't obvious to me. I've always thought that retail jobs are basically dead end jobs. You work minimum wage for plus some benefits at some store, and you clock in, you clock out. I, I think you're telling me that that's not necessarily true.
well, for the most part, if you do actually start off as a retail store salesperson, then yeah, you're going to be working for the store. I just happen to also work for a vendor rep, or as a vendor rep rather. So that made it a little bit, or I was able to get like a different perspective on things, but I got to see everything that everybody was kind of going through anyway.
Interesting. Okay, so hmm. That changes my mind a little bit in terms of the questions I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask. Well, let's start with the questions we said we were gonna ask, or I said I was
Sure.
gonna ask. Um, how do you get a retail job in the first place? And what's the number one thing to keep in mind when you apply to a retail job?
Well, for the retail job, like you have heard, it's probably not the best job to have, but it is actually a very easy job to actually get. So,
Hmm.
pick a store that you actually like, and because one of the perks, and I know this is going to be one of the questions later, but one of the perks is to be able to get discounts on certain items that they sell in the store. So, if you like the products in the store and you want to get some type of discounts on it, then consider that, because if you have some interest in that particular product, then it means that you're going to have a little bit more knowledge on it, or at least you will train yourself to have a little bit more knowledge on it, and um, it'll make it a little bit easier for you to sell that particular product as well.
Well, I know we're jumping ahead a little bit here. So, what kind of discounts do you usually get when you work in a store? And
That really
yeah.
is going to depend on the store itself. So, even in a big box electronics store, depending on what you want to buy, it's actually going to vary quite a bit.
Hmm.
So sometimes you might be able to get only like 5 or 10% off something. Sometimes you'll be able to get like a full 50, 60% off. And
Wow.
then depending on who you are or what particular product you're going for, they may actually have promotions from other vendors where you buy the product for your cost. And then on top of that, you might be able to get like rebates and stuff that will further lower the cost. Like, for example, now I'm really going to date myself, but I used to own a PDA, pocket
Oh, okay.
organizers,
Okay,
and
interesting. I wonder how many of the people watching this actually knows what a PDA is.
well, probably nobody. Well, I mean, if they're our age or maybe a little bit older, then they will definitely know or have used one. But yes, it's a pocket organizer. It basically looks like an iPhone or regular um, phones
Mhm.
today, but it didn't necessarily have a touch screen. But certain ones actually had the ability to use styluses, and you couldn't really make phone calls. It was really just utilizing certain files, using your calendar, maybe checking email. And this was around the time that Wi-Fi really wasn't all that available either. Like, it was starting to get more and more popular amongst homes, but it wasn't like super popular yet. Um, but
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, so going back,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was a so this was back when I was actually working at CompUSA, and there was the HP Jornada PDA. This was, I think the retail price was going for, I think it was like $700 or $800,
Oh,
um,
jeez.
and
Wow.
uh, from the discounts that I was able to get from the store, I think I was able to get maybe about 40% off. And then on top of that, if you were to go to HP's website or HP's training website and you did like all these quizzes and stuff, then you can actually get rebates off that particular product. And I think I had an additional, $300-400 worth of rebates on it. So in the end, I was actually able to get that for about $50.
Dang. Wait, you went from like $800 to $50?
Yeah,
Okay, that's pretty insane. That's pretty impressive.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So, if that's the case, I mean, why don't everybody work retail? There's got to be a catch to it, right? So,
Oh,
I think I'm jumping
definitely.
ahead here. I think I'm jumping ahead here to
Okay.
talk about like the bad things about working in retail. But so let's say that I'm interested in a retail job, and technically, I actually kind of am. So, there's this store over in Bellevue that is a ski store, and I like to ski. I like to snowboard. I teach skiing and snowboarding, and I've thought about for a while helping out at least on a seasonal kind of basis. So they have a big sale once a year, and this year their email came to me like, "Hey, we're looking for people to work for the event, and on top of the discounts that you already get from the event, you get an additional 20% off discount. and of course you get paid for it too, and for working that day. And I was like, hey, that's really interesting. So I started asking questions. I was at the store, and because I was just buying some ski equipment, and then I happened to be chatting with the manager, and I asked the manager like, hey, probably not this year, but maybe next year. Uh, what does it take if I want to work in the store? And they're like, oh yeah, you basically just have to be 16 and you have to be willing to learn about the product. And we ask that you work at least 2 days of the whole like 10 days of the event, because one day is just not enough for you to really know enough about the stuff that you're selling.
Hmm.
And I was like, that that sounds legit. That sounds like I can probably do that for the sake of getting an additional 20% discount. Doesn't
Hmm.
sound like too much commitment of my time. But I imagine that there's some sort of application that I have to that I have to fill out. I'm sure that my background check is going to be cleared out, not an issue there. So, what is the number one thing to keep in mind when, if for anybody who's interested, anybody who's like over 16, who's interested in making a little bit of extra money, um, or getting their first job?
Well, one of the things is you're going to have to be personable. You have to have that attitude, and you have to have the ability to be able to speak to people. If you don't have that capability, then you may not necessarily be able to get the job. But if you
Is there an
display,
actual interview then?
yeah, there's definitely an interview.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do they look for in the interview? They're just looking to see if you can talk to them and like,
Yeah,
is
it's
it?
again, it's really going to depend on which menu, which what is it store you actually try to apply for. So let's say you try to apply for I don't know, Office Depot. If you try to apply for Office Depot, then they're actually going to test you on like they're going to say, well, sell me this pen, and you got to try to be able to sell a pen to and be convincing about that particular pen. But if you are in like a clothing retail store, then they may ask you like, okay, so you have this particular shirt that this particular customer is interested in, and how would you talk with that particular customer, and um, what other things would you actually try to sell with that particular shirt? Because certain things in combination would actually look very good with that particular person.
Huh.
And so if you're able to actually bring in some other things and be able to sell three items instead of one item that the customer came in looking for, or let's say the customer just came in looking for just having questions, and you were able to convince that particular customer that uh, in addition to answering their questions, you were able to make them feel so comfortable that they were like, oh shoot, I think I am going to actually buy this particular product. If you're able to do something like that and you're able to display that during an interview, then they will love you. Um, and of course you have to have that good personality. Otherwise, it's not going to. If you are very dark and you're very shy, and you don't know exactly what you should be saying, then they'll probably pass on you.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely a skill, right? To talk to people, to talk to strangers, and there's definitely ways that people can build certain mechanisms to work up to it.
Hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I might be oversimplifying this. I'm thinking that at minimum, the easiest thing to do is to just approach people and say hi to them, and understand that most people might not say hi back, but that's probably the first thing. It's like, hi, is there anything I can help you with? And then you just go from there. They say no, cool, that's fine. They say yes, then they ask you a question, and hopefully you can help them out. Or you go, I think it's over there, or you point them to somebody else who can help out, that kind of thing. So you I'm thinking that you don't have to be that personable. You just have to be willing to take that first step and say, "Hi, how can I help you?"
Yeah, or,
And
or you can just actually kind of describe what you would potentially do in that particular situation. So if a customer comes in and you say you just want to greet them and say hi, how you doing? That's one thing. But if you greet them in the way where you say hi, but in addition to that, you ask them, what did you come, here to basically look for. You know, what are you looking for? How can I help you find whatever item you're looking for? Then they're gonna it's more of an open-ended question where they have to actually give you more of an answer to something that's a little bit more specific as to what they're looking for, and then you can actually guide them to or walk them to that particular location instead of just pointing, oh, this is, you want to go to this aisle, or of this row of this portion of the store. Because if you just kind of point at a specific direction, then yeah, they'll go and they'll find what they need and they'll just pick up that one thing. But let's say you do a little bit of small talk, so you're walking them over to that particular aisle and you're just asking them how's their day going, and whatever other small talk you want to potentially do.
Okay, wait.
Then
So I guess what I'm thinking retail, I'm thinking, like grocery stores and other types of stores where I go in, I buy something and I walk out. And very rarely, in my opinion, very rarely, I nowadays, when I go to a store and I ask for something, very rarely I actually have the employees walk me through and help me to that extent. I mean, it
mhm,
sounds like you're describing a completely different experience than what I'm used to.
yeah, I know, and that's the thing. If you were able to experience something like that, then you would actually have a much better experience, and it would probably make you want to go to that particular store more often. The thing is, uh, w- with most retail stores that I'm aware of, a lot of people, they don't really train them all that well. They kind of put them on the floor and say,
Oh,
okay,
interesting.
you know, you've taken the online quizzes, you have a pretty good idea of how the store works, so let's put you on the floor and see how you do.
So, wait, okay. So I'm a little confused now because I thought you said earlier that there is definitely an interview, and during the interview, they're going to see how well you work with customers
Mhm.
potentially. But now it sounds like you're saying that nowadays stores don't do that anymore.
No, so during the interview, they are still going to look for something like that. It it really depends again on the store, but generally, if you go to a good store with good management, with a store that actually trains really well, then you will be able to find stores that. What am I trying to say? I'm kind of losing my train of thought right now.
So I think you're trying to say that if the store has good management, the management is going to intentionally train the employees to be personable, going to train the employees to be knowledgeable about the product, and will be intentionally filtering out candidates to work in the store, people who have certain traits. I think that's what you're trying to say. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah. But then there are also management that will actually just see that you are a very personable person that will probably be able to figure things out yourself. And if that is the case, then they may just hire you to hire you because you are a very personable person. You have a great attitude, and they're going to say, okay, well, all the knowledge that you need is going to be through the computer in your training, and we'll just throw you out on the floor and see how you do.
Okay.
So there are managers like that. I prefer the type of managers that will actually walk with you, train you, or have somebody train you. Uh, at least so that you can actually shadow somebody that is a really good person and learn from the best.
So, and I think I might be opening up an entirely other can of worm here with my next question, and I don't want to take too much time on this because I do want to end this session at a reasonable amount of time, and we're at 19 minutes at this point. So, if it's that easy to get a retail job, why don't everybody get a retail job when they're struggling financially? If uh, what um, From your perspective, is it easy enough, let's say, for somebody who just ran away from home and now they don't have a place to stay, or somebody who is out on their luck and they're on unemployment for a while and they just need to make a little bit of money in order to, survive a
if
little bit?
if all they needed was to make a little bit of money, then I think that they would easily be able to get the job that they needed. But I think a lot of people they look at a retail job as maybe a secondary job so that they're not going to be available 7 days a week. Or if this is the only job that they're going to have, then minimum wage or something close to the minimum wage that they would have is not going to pay the bills, and
Mm, I
so they're
see.
going to try to find a better job, or they may end up going to someplace else that will pay a little bit better. But
Okay.
yeah, um,
So my takeaway from that wasn't obvious to me was that retail jobs are typically not a career and typically not something that would be your primary job. It would typically be something that would be a secondary job, something that people would go to and get as additional income or for the benefits.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. Okay, cool. So, given that you've worked 20 years in retail, what is it like working in retail? What are some of the good and what are some of the bad? And we already mentioned a little bit about the benefits, and you gave a very compelling reason there where you went from an $800 personal digital assistant, which nowadays that typically for people it means Alexa, but back then that definitely wasn't the case. Um, and you were able to get it from $800 and you brought it home. You brought it home for $50. What are some of the other good stuff about working retail, and what are some of the bad stuff?
Um, some of the good stuff, exactly when certain new things are coming in, and
Oh,
if the
cool.
company will let you buy it, then you have first dibs on it. So something like that again is always going to be a nice perk. And if you are fortunate enough to actually work with really good people, good managers, good coworkers, then it actually is a really fun environment, and a great first or second job to have, to help you grow. And if you want to actually become more of a leader or a manager, you do have more of an opportunity in these type of places to actually grow very quickly. Um, and that way, on your resume later on, you can say, I was a supervisor of this particular department, or I became a manager, and I had these responsibilities. So you had the capability of doing or saying something like that. But for some people, they just want a paycheck. So for those people, they're just going to work there, get their paycheck, and then buy whatever they like, whether it's games or clothing or food, or whatever it may be. And yeah, and then those would be considered their perks.
Interesting. Okay. So, let's say if somebody has a full-time job and they are not making enough money and their biggest concern is putting food on the table, then theoretically they can work part-time at a grocery store nearby and get discounts that way, probably.
Yeah. Or
Mm.
a couple friends that I know that have worked in grocery stores, they would actually be able to get some foods that are actually about to go bad, and they would be able to get that at a very, very low discount. So,
Very, very low price, but yeah. Okay, cool.
mhm.
What
Oh,
about
yeah.
some of the bad stuff about working retail?
You generally would have to be available 7 days a week, depending on the retail store. Sometimes you may have to work holidays, or like Black Friday and stuff like that, and um, your schedule is going to be all over the place. So sometimes you may have a early shift. Sometimes you may have a mid shift. Sometimes you may have an evening shift, and that's just going to jump all over the place.
So
And
I've
so,
heard about stuff like that, and that seems in my mind to conflict with the idea that this is a part-time job. Um, Assuming that this is a secondary job or a part-time job or something, then presumably you have a day job that has a fixed schedule, and so your part-time job needs to be able to accommodate that. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. It doesn't make sense to give up your day job in order to work your part-time job.
oh, yeah, and in those type of cases, you can always tell the employer, "Hey, I have a job from this time to this time," or you can say, "I go to school from this time to this time, so these are the times that I can't work," and then they'll actually look at that, and they'll schedule you around that particular schedule. But
Mm,
if you say you're going to be available at any time, then you're going to get scheduled in at crazy times.
I see. Okay. Okay, makes sense. Would you consider working at Costco, like at a Costco warehouse, a retail job?
Costco is probably one of those places where it'll probably turn more into a career. You
Mm.
kind of move up the ladder. I don't know about now, but it used to be that if you first started out at Costco and you didn't have previous experience in the retail world, then you start off by collecting the carts.
Oh,
And
interesting. Okay.
once you get past collecting the carts, then you then go inside and you'll be able to work in certain departments, and you kind of make your way up to certain areas of the store or possibly a manager or supervisor. That's generally the way it works. But yeah, Costco actually pays their employees pretty well from what I hear. And most people that I know, they kind of stick around. So the people that I know from Costco that I've known 10, 15 years ago, they're still there.
Huh. Wow. Very cool. Yeah, I haven't ever worked at a Costco myself, but I've seen the same people work at Costco for years and years, and I've also seen, and my sister have also worked at Costco at various parts of her life, and I've heard good things about Costco, so which is why I asked. Okay, cool. Any wild stories from working in retail?
Yes. Like I
Things
said,
that you're comfortable sharing, but yes.
I'm totally comfortable sharing just about anything, but whether this is actually going to be good for your listeners or not, that's really going to be up to them. But the craziest thing that I personally saw that made me go, "What the hell?" Whiskey Tango Foxtrot was
Yeah.
Black Friday, and everybody's like rushing into the door. It's a typical Black Friday that you would think of. And then it was maybe a few hours in, people were getting really annoyed because already certain things are sold out. This is in a Best Buy,
Ooh.
by the way.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Well,
yeah,
you
yeah.
worked at a Best Buy on a Black Friday?
Yeah, I've worked in a Best Buy. I've worked in a Staples. I've worked in an Office
Jeez.
Depot. I've
On a
worked
Black
at,
Friday, that's brave.
yeah. Uh, Never a Walmart, though.
Never at Walmart. That's
Yes.
yeah, that's another level.
Uh,
Every yeah,
I've always actually avoided the Walmarts on a Black Friday. Yeah.
I see.
Eh, Anyway, so
Probably a good reason, but yes, go ahead.
yeah, the customers are roaring in, and uh, some people are almost getting trampled over.
Oh.
And then there was this dude that was really pissed off because he came in for a particular product. I don't remember what it was. I think it was a TV, and the TV was sold out. He was pissed. He really wanted that TV. So the way he retaliated was he got into the middle of the store, pulled his pants down, and basically took a dump in the middle of the store.
Oh gosh. Ew.
Yeah.
Wow.
And because there were so many people and people were so focused on trying to get to the area that they needed to get to, nobody
Ew.
actually realized what the dude was actually doing until it was too late and people started smelling the shit.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. Okay. So I hope it didn't get any worse than that. I hope people didn't like trample it or like roll over it and scatter it all over the stores.
Nah. I mean,
Okay.
you smell something like that, people will walk away. Yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
felt I
Cool.
felt bad for the manager that actually had to clean it up afterwards, but it is what it is.
So the manager had to go and clean it up themselves.
Mhm.
So the
Yep.
manager didn't just go to somebody else and go, "Hey, you go clean that up."
No, because everybody has their own tasks, and nobody's really available on a Black Friday. Everybody is so busy with customers trying to take care of everybody, and that's where a manager has to step in and do manager stuff.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay. Okay. Very cool. Yeah. Um, I talking about retail probably makes me think about another story that's a lot less fun and a little bit more on the depressing side. So I'll just mention it briefly, and maybe on another episode I'll talk about it a little bit more. Anyway, it just so happened that I there was one particular point in time that I was talking to this older gentleman, and he told me we were at a conference together, and there's a story as to why how both of us ended up in that conference together. But we were at a conference together, and I had chatted with him, and then I found out that basically he had worked for a retail store for about 20 years of his life. And he had moved up the ranks, and he had done really well. And he was the person that corporate sent to different stores in the area to figure out how to be more efficient, how to be more effective, how to save money, how to get the store from red to black, how to get the store from not making a profit, from losses into profitable. And he had done really well, and he ended up somehow being transferred to a store where he was reporting to somebody who was a lot younger than him, who really didn't like him. And that person ended up basically ending his career. And so at 60 something years old, pretty close to 65, and 20 years dedicating his life to these chains of stores and helping them be profitable, he is out looking for a new job. And he was telling me that his next step was to go back to community college and learn computer networking so that he can get an IT job. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am not going to be that guy. I don't want to be 60 something years old and trying to start an entirely new career without, yeah. Anyway, that just sounds terrifying to me, and that is also really sad. Anyway, I didn't really want to end with a sad story, but that was the thing that came to mind just now, and I was like, I tell this story to my students all the time, and that is part of the reason why I push and I try to grow my career as much as possible now and save up, because at some point we get at some point we don't know what's going to happen in the future, basically.
Well, nobody ever knows what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, yeah, nope, that's true. But a lot of people live that way, right? A lot of people live in such a way that they assume they're going to continue having their job. They assume they're going to continue making as much money as they do now, if not more. And then bad things happen, and
Hmm.
things don't work out, and that's terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Well, do you have any fun stories so that we don't end on a completely depressing note?
Any fun stories? Yeah. Most retail stores, you generally make some pretty good friends, or at least fun friends. And
Okay.
if you
Wait,
become,
how do you
if
define a fun friend as
well,
opposed to
so
good
so
friends?
so first of all, you got to be kind of a social person. You can't be you can't be an antisocial person. But let's just say you are a social person. You happen to know people, and you kind of hang out with some of the employees outside of work and stuff. Whenever they have parties, man, it's pretty fun. Everybody gets together, go to a restaurant, everybody gets drunk, uh, and it's just it's kind of like family in a way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. That's definitely an aspect of life that I never got to explore or experience, for better or worse. I don't know if my kids are going to explore that at some point. It was something that I recommended to my older one in particular, where I'm like, hey, you know, you're a teenager now. At some point, maybe you can work at this ski store and get discount equipment for yourself, because his equipment aren't exactly cheap. They're like $500, $1,000 total. Being able to get that discount, or at least getting the items at cost, is something that would help a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
If he absolutely enjoys skiing and that type of gear, then I think it'll be great. If he
yeah,
doesn't, then again, try to go after something that you enjoy as much as possible, because then you'll be able to take that enthusiasm as you are selling the product to other people, and you might be able to sell more that way. So that's my advice number one. Advice number two is, regardless of whether you want to or not, if you are in retail, just try to move up ranks as quickly as possible. Even if your plan is to only stick around for like a year and a half, it is totally possible to actually get like a supervisor or manager type of position within that time period. And when you do have that position and you're able to actually make that little extra money, so let's just say you go from $16 an hour to $18 an hour because now
Wow.
you're a manager. Um, you can then put that into your resume, and seeing that on a resume, regardless of whether you go next or where you go next, it's just going to look a lot better to most of the people that are going to be interviewing you.
Wait, what exactly would you put on the resume that you
That
became a manager?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you
Okay.
can say that from a certain time to a certain time you were just a store associate, and then from certain time to certain time, then you became a supervisor, and then at a certain point you became a manager, and then if that time frame is actually very short, and even within that short time span, you were able to accomplish certain goals, like uh, being able to, you went from just selling really well to being able to train a lot of your employees and having them being able to train army and sell really well. That kind of shows a lot of leadership, and also the ability to train, ability to actually communicate with people, and that type of skill set will actually be very important to any other employer, because everybody wants somebody that actually communicates well.
That's really fascinating. Okay. And that really resonates with me. And I'll just make this one last comment and have you respond to it if you have anything to respond to, and then we'll close it. I never realized that it went to that extent because as you know, I work in Amazon for my day job and plus a whole bunch of other side jobs. And for Amazon in particular, there's leadership principles. And we call it leadership principles because people are expected, every single employee in Amazon are expected to take leadership in what they do. And a lot of times when it comes to being a leader, it really comes down to, are you the kind of person who takes initiatives? Are you the kind of person who is proactive? Are you the kind of person who's always pushing to make things better? And it sounds like you're describing that in retail you can, that could be a start of building up those skills, building up those tendencies and habits to get to what Amazon values very much as leadership principles, to get to the
Yeah.
point of like, hey, I see a problem, I'm going to go address it and go from there and get promoted to supervisor, manager, and so on. It sounds
Mhm.
like it aligns really well to that.
Yeah, totally. It's something that is um, preferred in just about any company.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
I did
if
not know
you're
that.
yeah, if you're able to do that at a very early age, and you're able to kind of produce that on a resume, then other employers will look at that, and they'll not only see that you were able to move up the ranks in a very small time period, if it only took you a couple years or so to actually do that, but when you are asking for a certain price, for payment, then you might be able to get that, or you're more likely to actually be able to get what you're asking for, versus them saying, "Oh, we're going to hire you at a minimum wage again."
Interesting. Okay. Very
Yeah,
cool. Very cool. All right. I think that's all the time we have for now. And
cool.
um, as always, I want to ask the questions to my viewers who are typically probably going to be my students from Europe Bothell, but um, the idea is these episodes are intended to bring up things that maybe are not obvious to you. And I want to ask the question: what were some things that were obvious to you, and was there anything new that you learned? And of course, if there's other things that we talked about in the episode that seemed obvious to me and Kentatsu, but it's not obvious to you, definitely mention it in the comments, and then we'll see it at some point and we'll respond to it. And as always, if you like the episode, please subscribe for more content. We're going to have more of these kinds of episodes where I chat with Kentatsu as well as other people in a lot of different fields. And of course, my typical content that I provide also when it comes to programming and such. So thank you and see you next time.